Good morning. I want to welcome you to the program. My name is Teresa Campbell. I'm president for PIA Mid-America, your regional commercial print and packaging association. You have joined our print industry's affiliate webinar on the insights and analysis of the wage and benefits survey. Welcome to you and to all of our affiliate partners from across the nation. Before we get started, I want to note that all of our attendees are in mute mode so that we can ensure a quality recording that will be made available to each of our members following the program, as well as a PDF of the slides. Questions should be asked in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and technical difficulties in the chat field. Kristen and Heather from my staff, as well as Steve Bonoff and Ben from his staff, will manage those Q&A as well as technical difficulties to make sure we get all of your questions answered. So now I'd like to welcome today's co-presenter, Rick Riesgraf, who is with the CPA and management firm L.B. Carlson. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Teresa. Thanks for having me. And we're just pleased to participate in this and add some insights if we can.
Excellent. So I'll begin the presentation and then I'll pass it over to Rick to present on labor management concerns, and then we'll both come back together during the last portion of the presentation. So I'm going to get started really with the, hang on a second here. I'm going to go into full mode. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is the wage and benefit report explained, the portal for the wage and benefit and updates to that portal, what that data means, how to use the data, some industry insights on where jobs and candidates might be, talk a little bit about the Print is Everywhere recruitment campaign, planning and next steps, and why you should participate. First off, in talking about what it is and how it's used, it is by far the most extensive and reliable labor management report in the graphic communications industry nationwide. Thanks to Joe Polanco, who has been a part of doing this really since the 70s, this information has been captured. So there's a lot of long, historic, rich data with nearly 500 companies participating nationwide and more than 17,000 employee data points. It is great data that we should be using to manage our companies. More than 130 industry-specific positions and a white paper this year with key areas to help you and your leadership make decisions for 2021 and beyond. I can't thank each of the sister affiliates enough. It is all of these sister affiliates that makes this happen through each of the regional associations to gather this data so that we have rich content that can drive how you plan for your organization and deal with profitability and other challenges. So let's talk just a little bit of the format of the report. It is designed in this fashion so that you get a wide range of how the numbers look, with the number of companies being reported, the number of employees, and then the averages across the board. It's broken out both in region and in company size, but in general, this fashion. So on the low end, you see the very bottom, and on the highest end on the right, you see the very top. But the median and the average are highlighted so that you can really get a clean, true understanding of what data we have, as well as the quartile 1, quartile 3, and P90, which is 90% of all of the wages and salaries reported. So the high end becomes separated out. Any questions on this when you're using the report should be asked. We're all here to help support you. The regions are really important as well. So compensation and policies differ across the country and are extremely different in some instances when you think about printing companies in the South versus the Northeast versus the West Coast. So they're broken out in this fashion to group them together so that you can clearly see what's happening in your area, or even why someone who may have moved to your area that you're trying to recruit is asking for what you feel like is an unreasonable wage, but they were making that wage if they came from the Northeast, for example. So those regions are important.
Teresa,
Yes.
on that regional influences, I think are going to become even more important as we look to 2021 and beyond, with the political influences, the impact on minimum wage, the impact on unemployment benefits and worker availability. So it's really key that this data is broken out that way. I think it's be helpful to the members.
So that's a really, really good point. Some of our sister affiliates have enough participation that they can even see in their reports a more detail of their specific few states or affiliate, and that helps as well. For instance, in Mid-America, Missouri was the first of our 4 states to abandon the additional unemployment benefit, and then Texas followed them. Well, that makes a big difference when we're talking about getting people back to work and how wages are affected. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's very important. The report goes into 2 sections in the front half. One is salary and one is hourly, and that really shows you your more management style employees versus your hourly employees. And we ask you to input the information in that fashion. So we're comparing apples to apples. We're looking to information that is correct. So if you look here at the top for salaried employees, although the average of all companies was $66,000 a year, in the Northeast, it's $75,000 a year. I mean, that's nearly $10,000 more in payment for those individuals. And then it drops 10 grand below that in the Southeast. So you can see them jumping around here. And that's a big deal when we talk about regions. The same thing here for hourly. And I didn't list the particular position because here we're looking in general across all positions. But again, you can see on the low end for an hourly employee, it could be down to $12 an hour and all the way up to $35 an hour. That's a pretty significant swing. And that's just based on company size and region and so forth. So here again, we look at regions versus company size, and it's broken out in both fashions. That's really important because again, in the Northeast, you're looking at an average of $75,000 for a particular position. But for a company of 1 to 25 employees, it's $44,000. Again, a significant swing. And as labor is being considered as a cost, you have to consider all of those aspects with other elements like experience and tenure and so forth. Benefits are in the last half of the report, and those 2 are broken out by region and by company size. Again, super important here. If you look at no healthcare plan offered by region, across all regions, there were only about 5% that did not offer a healthcare plan. But if you come down here to company size for no health care plan offered, that jumps to 11% for companies that are under 25 employees and 0 when you get over 75 employees. So that's a cost of doing business and a recruitment tool, and it could be a disadvantage or an advantage depending on where you are in the market. So important to consider. That's only one benefit element. There are lots of others that are considered in there. So let's talk about the actual portal at printindustries.org. When you go to that portal, wage and benefit is under the business tab, and then the survey there at the bottom. There's an overview. There are resources on job descriptions. So we know that you're inputting the correct position, even if your title might be slightly different than what is listed in the survey. And then the reports and how to get the reports are out there as well. If you are an existing user, if you've used the report before and put your information into the portal, one of the great additions is that it's retrievable. So you can log in using your email and password or your team member's email and password that you've done before. It'll pull up last year's survey and then you can just update it. So it's not quite as time consuming as if you were starting from scratch. If you have not done it before, it's not terribly difficult. You're going to register at the bottom. First, you have to select your affiliate. That's important because it's helping us track which region you're in across the country. Once you select your affiliate, then you input your contact information. And down here at the bottom is a brand new feature this year, which is really important that I'm excited about. And that is the additional locations. So in years past, if you were an organization that had locations in multiple regions, sometimes it became gray, and we want to make sure that we help you to break those out so that numbers that are in California that may be different than those in Chicago or Dallas or New York get broken out into that category. And one person, one HR manager that might be entering it for all locations can do that really easily here under this additional location options. You click, I have multiple locations, and it gives you the option to enter different addresses to help us track it. Now, if you've already used the wage and benefit survey before, and you had multiple locations, I want you to email us so that we can break it out for you based on what you entered before. This additional locations really only pops up if you're a new user, and we can start from scratch. Okay, so we're going to move into the white paper and what all of this data that we've gathered over the years means. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick, and allow you to drive this portion of the presentation.
Okay, thanks. You've got control of the PowerPoint though, so you're going to drive that, right?
Yeah, you're going to have to tell me if I need to move to the next slide.
I will. Yeah, just a word about the white paper. The white paper is a 20+ page white paper regarding some aspects of how to use the wage and benefit data, and describe some labor management tools that a lot of members use, and also some industry insights that we gathered by talking to members. The people that pulled that together, Teresa, Joe, our office, and a lot of input from members. I think this year was a really unusual year with the pandemic and now the recovery, and so I think this white paper is going to be critically important for the members to really try to understand the data. There might be some nuances that are going on that are hard to come by unless we look at the white paper. So it's just something important. And I think everybody that registers for the 21 information is going to get a copy of the white paper for free, right, Teresa?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation.
Okay, great. So one of the things that we did in the white paper, and I'm not going to get into this in too big a detail, but it's like, what are some of the common uses of the wage and benefit information? What are our members using it for? I just highlighted a few things on this slide here. One of the things that probably most of our members and our clients use it for is to assist them in their annual compensation review, to validate their own structure, potential raises, looking at where they're going, and just making sure that they're not out there on an island. And it's been extremely useful in that regard. And so I have a lot of my clients that use this as a point of reference before they start that process each year, and it's been extremely helpful. And you know, your employees are out there looking to try to figure out what they should get paid, and sometimes they think they know better than you do. So it's very helpful to have this data as a backdrop to be able to provide them. I've had plenty of my clients supply this information to the client, to their employees, so that it's transparent, so that the employees feel that they're being treated fairly, and that they're in the ballpark when it comes to the wages and things like that. So it's also been used that way. And certainly to make a lot of management decisions. I think more and more we're seeing this data pulled out when, like, I just had a client, they hired a new CFO, and they wanted to make sure that they put that person on at the right pay range. So they looked at this wage and benefit information to make that decision. Another member made an acquisition recently and wanted to make a review of the acquisition candidate's wage structure, the wage and benefit survey was extremely helpful to do things like that. So it helped in navigating the acquisition process. And there's just the numerous projects in reviewing internal labor costs, outsourcing, that type of thing. So we highlight a few of those instances in the report to maybe get you thinking ways you could use the data. The next slide, Teresa, talks about a little bit about the benefits and the policies and some of the trends we saw in the study. Maybe you wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, in fact, this is something that I had worked with Joe Polanco on, at looking at trends from the previous year and where those policies had increased or changed. So if you look at 2019 to 2020, the written drug policy actually grew from 69% to 76%, where Saturday overtime decreased, sick time or PTO increased. That's a big deal. Of course, we saw companies not offering wage adjustment increases, and that was due to COVID. But in general, increases for those that did give them stayed the same, about 2 or 3% to the previous year. Now, those things that are important that are going to affect your companies are, what does the written drug policy look like going forward? It seems to be leveling off, and that is a significant topic. People are in demand. They need workers. We don't have enough workers. You see it in the restaurant industry, where they have certain sections of the restaurant closed because they don't have enough workers to offer that level of service. We can't let down our efforts to be a drug-free work zone where someone could get hurt, and there could be work comp claims that will cost you more in the long run. But it does appear that that written drug-free policy could be more lenient. So you want to watch for that. The Saturday overtime has been sporadic through the recovery of COVID, where some are doing a lot of overtime and others not as much. So it's really an up and down roller coaster at this point that we expect to level off. PTO accumulation really has to be managed. That's a liability for your company. You have to go back and look at your employee handbook and how that works. In fact, Rick and I were having a discussion earlier about not being able to foresee what COVID would bring, and you probably need to take a look at how you're going to deal with that. I was working with a member in my region that had a longtime employee that was using work share with the state that they were in, but had 3 weeks of vacation, and now it was becoming an issue. And have you thought about how you're going to handle that going forward? Are they accumulating benefits that they can't use because you were shut down, or you're not fully open, or you still have limited access to your facility? Better to face it up front and plan for how you're going to handle it when it may come up. And then entry-level wages increasing significantly as unemployment benefits decline. And I'll reference the Chipotle organization, who across the board, across the country, announced that they were going to go to a minimum of $15 per hour. That affects all of labor across the board. If they could leave your organization to go to work at Chipotle for increased hourly wage. Comments or thoughts there? Joe, you're on mute.
I can interject. This area I think is critical, because we're in a place right now that we've been looking for people for quite a while, and now we have the opportunity to start reaching into some of these areas that are, for lack of a better word, underemployed, and people are trying to shift into other industries. There's a nice article in the Wall Street Journal the other day, comments from the NFIB about how small business, which is our industry, is truly challenged in finding people and bringing them in. This is why I think this kind of program with our wage and benefit survey is critical, because this is just our industry. It's profiling what our industry benefits are, what our industry compensation is. And we also need to look at other industries, because someone coming, as you mentioned, from Chipotle now being paid $15 an hour, and you want to put them in the bindery and you're paying $9, you got an issue. So these are things that we have to really look and manage into the future, because we are going to be seeing some cost pressures as far as wages over the next year, year and a half. At the same time, there's going to be opportunities for us to reach down and get some employees that probably have different skill sets they can bring with us. And Teresa, I know this is to your core, training them becomes critical, but that's another whole issue. I just wanted to interject on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Rick, do you have comments as well?
No, I just think that I echo that. It's critically important, though it's not just graphic arts industry, it's all industries are facing this challenge right now, and you're fighting for the workers, trying to get some of those that have been on the sidelines re-engaged, and everybody is challenged right now. So we're gonna all have to work together to win this battle, and it's gonna take some creative ideas. So again, in the survey, we hope to get a bunch of that stuff coming back to you. So.
Excellent, excellent. All right, talk to us about headcount.
Well, labor is one of the most, well, I think it is the largest controllable expense in printing plants. Everybody thinks of paper, but you can't do much about the price of paper once it comes into your plant. What you can do is manage labor, though. And so in our white paper, we've got a number of tools and suggestions, best practices, if you will, that we've gleaned from members. And one of these things is the headcount schedule. It's just an example here that you can see on the screen. It's a very simple schedule, but it's a very critical schedule. We encourage our clients to use this kind of a schedule, prepare it monthly and update it monthly. We've seen too many times in the past where headcount gets out of line with sales volume or the complexity of your work, and the adjustments aren't made as they should be quickly, and that's a common occurrence. So I don't want to beat anybody up for it, but it is one that the good companies manage well, and this is a tool to help you to keep an eye on that. So we break it out by department, by area, and just at a glance you can tell what your headcount is each month, each area. And does it make sense with where you're at with volume? Does it make sense with where you're headed with work? It's not the end all answer, but it's something that helps. And I just wanted to share an example. This is a few years ago, but we had a client come to us, a larger printer, in trouble. They were losing 7 figures. And they knew they had too many people, but they didn't know where, didn't know how to even go about it. And the place we started was had them fill out their headcount schedule in this manner. And we did further analysis in each department based on that schedule, that review. And there was a right sizing done. 30 people, 30 positions were determined to be excess, and so those corrections were made, and the year after the corrections were made, that particular client posted a 7-figure profit. And so that client, that was a few years ago, has never gone away from using this headcount schedule. So it's just it's a tool that even the big companies use. So next slide.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Sometimes we get caught up in, how can I let people go? I'm taking on responsibility for, some of their family, and
Yep.
that's a concern. The
Yep.
flip side of that, of course, is we might not have a company in the future for any of the employees if we can't make it profitable and cover our expense. It's a downward spiral, and we're in a lot more trouble. And the responsibility is really to the company as a whole, to make sure that you're right sizing and you're managing it, and not sticking your head in the ground and hoping it'll go away.
That's a huge point, Teresa. On that example I just shared, what they knew they had the issue, they just couldn't bring themselves to deal with the issue, but they were in jeopardy of having to jeopardize the entire 250 member workforce. So it was a tough, agonizing decision and process to go through, but it was one that saved the company, and those jobs, and then some, have grown since that day. So.
Right. This last point here, Rick, to make sure that you're classifying employees correctly so that your data is accurate for comparison. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's always important to have an apple to apple. And I think we spent, I know I spent my career in graphic arts trying to make sure that our clients are looking at things the same way and putting the things in the right bucket. So not just on the headcount schedule, but in some of the labor metrics and things that we're going to be talking about, making sure that you put things in the right spot so that you can compare yourself favorably to a competitor. And I think the wonder of the wage and benefit study is that all those positions are there, but when you're starting to use them in labor management tools, you got to make sure that you sort them out. And one example here was, the customer service representatives are there's always been a debate: are they part of selling versus are they indirect labor? And more and more, they're now called job planners, and they are called indirect labor in virtually every company that we see now. But that wasn't always the case. So the industry had to morph to get everybody putting them in the right spot to get good comparisons.
Good point. Very good point.
Just some other points here. Labor isn't a fixed cost. So, some of the metrics that we're going to be sharing are meant to try to help you optimize performance in labor and track those fluctuations and do something about them when you can. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't want to. There could be a very temporary downward turn in sales, and you're not gonna make those adjustments in labor because you'll end up hurting yourself. A few weeks down the road when you're trying to hire people and somebody else is glommed down to your people. So. But it is important to just not assume it's a fixed cost, and that we should be looking at those fluctuations in the hiring, termination, managing overtime, and temp help. We'll get into that in a minute too. A word on benchmarking. We in our white paper we give a lot of different metrics. We're not going to go through them all today, but benchmarking to what? How do we benchmark? A lot of times, most of our members are benchmarking to their targets, to their internal budgets, to their internal past performance, the actual numbers. And then if they can get data on similar size companies or profit leader targets, they're putting that in the mix as well. But the important thing is try to benchmark, try to compare your numbers to what you are hoping to accomplish. So just wanted to say that. Next. Payroll as a percent of value added. I wanted to talk about value added sales for a minute. This is a concept that has been around in the industry for many, many years. The old PIA performance ratios emphasize the value added sales concept. When you're managing payroll and trying to optimize performance, I think it's even more critical that we talk value-added sales compared to just gross sales. And I'll go through that a little bit more in an example in a minute. But the value-added sales, for those that might not be familiar with it, is you take your gross sales less your cost of paper and outside materials, and we call the net result value-added sales. Those are the sales you're bringing in the door to pay the light bill, to pay your employees, to pay yourselves, pay your advertising costs, that type of thing. The cost of paper and outside purchases are really just trading dollars with an outside vendor. And so we try to, not just with labor, but a lot of other costs too, we try to look at the relationships of your costs and your expenses to the value-added sales dollar. And we end up finding that there's a much more reliable information that's being generated when you run your percentages that way, as opposed to off the gross sales, because those fluctuations in paper and outside materials can really play havoc with the numbers. And I'll show you that in a minute here. But so we do emphasize value-added sales. A lot of our members, if not most, are using that when they look at labor and the metrics that they're establishing and the targets, performance targets that they're setting. So so I just wanted to touch on that concept and then get into it a little deeper here in the next slide. One of the things that we have in the white paper is some comparisons for you to consider are ways to compare your value added per employee. You know, that goes up and down over the course of the year, your slow periods, your busy periods, there's no doubt. But we try to get our members to annualize that if they can on a monthly basis, and certainly to look at it in trends. But again, you're comparing your actual to your own budget. If you have profit leader information and other firm information, you can compare that as well to other targets. But the value added per employee is one of the metrics that we see a lot of members trying to shoot for a particular performance level. In this particular example here, this is a real example. Their budget was $136,000 in dollars of value added per employee. Their actual performance was quite below, and obviously this was impacted by COVID and the downturn and that type of thing. So we're probably going to see some of that type of thing in our metrics for a year or two as we recover from that. But it's still an important benchmark and a comparison that we use. So next. Another way of looking at the payroll is looking at payroll as a percent of value added sales. My example is going to go through that in a minute, but again, in this took that same company and ran the example. The higher the percent, generally the worse you're doing compared to your target. And in this case, the actual was 42% compared to 39% target. The profit leaders were even better. And so, but it was important to note that all the other firms were having the same trouble. And so at least you misery loved company in this particular instance. But so it's just another way of looking at the value added or the payroll as a percent of value added.
And would you call that a measurement of productivity?
Well, it's definitely, yes, but it's not exclusive productivity. It could be also a reflection of your sales mix, your pricing. So, but one way or another, either you maybe have too many people causing the percentage to be higher than budget, or your sales went down and you didn't react quick enough, or you didn't want to react quick enough, or your margins went down because of pricing. So it's an indicator that points you to go figure out what do we think is going on. So we look at this monthly at a lot of our clients, and if we see that starting to slide up, we want to know that the client is on top of trying to figure out the whys of what's driving that change. Does that make sense?
Yep, excellent.
Okay. Here was my example of payroll as a percent of value added sales and why I prefer to look at value added versus gross sales. And this is, I just took company A and company B. They both had monthly sales, gross sales of $1 million. So the same gross sales figure. However, one company A had paper and outside materials of 400,000. Company B had 600,000. So the amount of dollars we're bringing into the plant in this particular month is significantly different between company A and B. The value added sales for A is 600,000. For B, it's 400,000. The labor dollars company A spent and company B spent were 300,000 and 250,000. So if you looked at labor as a percent of sales and said that's my metric, you're gonna see that company B, you take the 250,000 divided by the million, that's 25%. Company A, 300,000 divided by a million is 30%. So on the face of it, you'd think you're doing better because you had a lower percentage. So don't get fooled by that. And that's what we try to eliminate that fluctuation in paper and outside materials by using labor as a percent of value added sales. And there we took the same labor figures, divided it into the value added sales. And now you can see that company A as a percentage was performing a lot better than company B. So they were managing their labor a lot better.
Great example. That's a really good example and a way to simplify it.
Well, I hope so. It gets a little muddy sometimes. So.
Yeah, in a previous slide, when you talked about the headcount schedule, there was an example there of where, you could have a $50,000 leeway. And this is a good example of how that can happen.
Absolutely, right. And we've had horror stories where people got fooled and don't. And what happens is if you get fooled by this paper and outside purchase issue, it may cause a 2 or 3 month lag before you figure that out and be able to make those course corrections, and therefore you have increased your losses if you've done that. So, okay.
Terrific.
A word on overtime and temps. We've got some time devoted to that in the white paper as well. It's an area that we found that often gets a little bit overlooked. You're focusing on your workforce for the most part, your and your core wages for the most part. The overtime in the temp areas can really result in some problems if they're not managed properly. So it is an area that we wanted to emphasize a little bit in the white paper. So the inefficiencies in labor and how you manage that are obviously managed usually with overtime or temps. And so those ebbs and flows in the workforce, it's a natural thing to do to manage heavy periods with more overtime or temps. The thing that we find quite often is as the volume drops back down, maybe the overtime, maybe the temp force doesn't go back down, and it's not being looked at as carefully as it should be. And so we want to make sure that we emphasize that. And then the other factor is, if assuming you have good data on your overtime and your temps, there's a point in there, a couple points on overtime. If you have a lot of consistent overtime, that's usually higher dollars you're paying out per hour. And if it's consistent, there's a math exercise that you should be doing to determine when to hire the full-time employee, put them on regular time, and so if that consistent workload is there, you want to be watching that. And of course, if there's abuses in the overtime, you also want to pick up on that. Similarly, on the temp labor side, and I know you're going to talk about sources for where do we find people. Well, the temp labor pool has been a traditional one to find people, but the temp labor works wonderfully well. So I'm not poo-pooing it, but sometimes you get a consistent temp labor pool. It might make more sense to hire from the temp labor agency some of those people onto your workforce that they've proven themselves, they're contributing now, and you want them on your workforce, and that experience they've gained can be enhanced as they stay with you as a permanent employee rather than bouncing back and forth as a temp labor person. So
that's a really, really good topic and a great one for discussion, particularly as our members try to manage their labor cost and the increasing cost of benefits. And so some will go to a place where they feel like they don't want to deal with that at all. They'll just deal with the temps. We have had companies that have an annual spend of $1 million a year on temps. And at what point does that become way too costly and so inefficient because they have no experience for the most part? And can we increase our profitability if we do bring them in as permanent full-time labor?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We had a client that focused on overtime and temp as just, this was actually pre-COVID, the year before COVID hit, but they just decided to make an initiative to try to do a better job on that. And they were able to move that labor percentage that I talked about before by 2 percentage points of their total value added by doing these things, managing the overtime better, bringing people on as permanents out of the temp pool. And so if it gets ignored, it can cost you. And if you work it, it can really help you a lot. So
yeah, 2% can be a lot of money when you're talking about profitability.
Yeah, this was a bigger client. It was over $500,000 a year. So
Yeah. There's a question here from Lou Karen that says, Rick, can you comment on how companies determine whether they compare operationally to others? It seems to me that comparisons have to be consider the nature of operations of companies, such as the company with higher revenue from digital operations versus offset, and they may not be comparable with the reverse. Even more so, a company with a bindery or fulfillment operation. The point is that he worries about having to be about being smart about the makeup of the sample.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Lou, on that question. I agree 100%. You have to try to get an apple to an apple, or you're in dangerous territory, I'll say, because if you're comparing yourself to someone who doesn't do the same things as you, doesn't do them the same way as you do, that can be a dangerous game, because you'll end up having the wrong target. So that's why I emphasize trying to have similar competitors. I didn't mean similar, it's just similar size. I meant similar segment, similar type of work. That's hard to do, but you know what? This industry has been very good about sharing data back and forth, as evidenced by the success of this wage and benefit survey. And we have had a lot of people, a lot of clients and members willing to share that information through peer groups, through the PIA ratio studies used to do a really good job of that. And that was a great source. They're trying to get that revitalized again. And so I hope that does happen, because I think that was a great source to get those benchmarks, the right comparisons made. So I hope that answered it. I agree with Lou. So.
Excellent.
The next three slides here just was a little bit of some of the metrics that we gave in the white paper, and some of the examples of how we laid those out. I'm not going to go through all these, but I just wanted to wet your whistles a little bit on. There's a number of things in there that are best practices and comparisons that a lot of members are using that we're seeing, and so we use some of the things that we actually see in practice and that are being used to optimize labor performance and control costs, I guess. So I don't really want to dive in. Some of these we've hit already, but I didn't want to dive into it anymore here, Teresa. Okay. So these next couple of slides. So I think I turn it back to you after this.
Okay. So there are many examples in the white paper, and of course we can't go through all that detail today in a webinar, but some great equations, some great ways for you to compare in different aspects to measure whether or not your company is on the right track and doing the right measurement. So here are some of those that are an example that are in the white paper, and some others. Sales per factory employee versus value added per employee, so that you could start tracking all of these in a metrics fashion. Okay, so the second half of the white paper really focuses on industry insights. How does our industry compare with other manufacturing industries, and where are all the factors that we need to look at? As Joe Polanco mentioned earlier, we were already facing a workforce crisis before COVID, and then that turned everything upside down, and it's really not shaken out yet. We have candidates moving among industries, and there's opportunity there, some good opportunities. Some don't want to go back to the food industry that may be interested in the graphics and print industry, but it's bordering on a crisis. Of course, the baby boomers were the largest generation, and every generation following that has been smaller. And that, of course, has had an effect on the number of workers we have. Our society's gone through an evolution of higher education competing with trade workers or blue collar workers, where all of society believed for our students to be successful, they needed to go on to a higher education opportunity. But we now know that that's not meant for everybody and our graduation rate from four-year institutions is 25% or less. They're coming home with debt. We're recognizing that they were maybe more mechanically inclined and could be hugely successful in a trade field, electricians, HVAC, and potentially make more money without the debt. However, we are competing with other manufacturing industries in a major way, and the wages continue to rise. Here is a chart that I want to share with you guys showing some insight on hourly wage paid for specialized manufacturing. Truck drivers are off the chart, being paid over $32 an hour, and journeyman electricians following that. If you look here, print and packaging wages are in line with the other industries, both on the digital and the offset side. However, what we found in our research is that the demand for the other industries is much greater, significantly greater. With these numbers, I want to show you that the number of employers with active job listings out there outnumbers print positions by the thousands. So you see pressman and bindery operator job positions barely making the chart on the left, and truck drivers with over 20,000 jobs, 22,000 open jobs out there. You know, not only do we face the challenge that not everyone in society knows exactly what print is or what print does, but when we compete with 20,000 job listings versus ours that barely make the chart, it's even tougher. This really shows you nationwide those number of jobs that are out there. And again, here's our pressman and bindery operators, very low. All the others off the charts. You know, the next lowest was sheet metal technicians, and it still was much greater than our job listings. Experienced candidates are on the decline. We've known that for some time. A large number of our freshmen were from the baby boomer generation, but there are still mechanically inclined individuals that are being recruited heavily across all of manufacturing. The most interesting thing we saw was opportunities among shipping and receiving individuals. That candidates in that pool shows us there's a great opportunity, as well as temp labor that we might not be considering. There are more job seekers in that shipping and receiving area than in other manufacturing categories. Their wages fall in general under general manufacturing at the bottom of the scale. Those are the ones that we think could be recruited into that position and moved over into pressman or digital pressman bindery type jobs. Most of those individuals described their position that they didn't feel they were contributing to the larger company goal of creating the sellable product. They didn't see their job as having meaningful work or being a part of a larger team. Our industry can solve those problems for those individuals. We can train them by looking at those that might have mechanical aptitude and move them over. Again, shipping and receiving and temp labor. So if you look at this chart, previously we were looking at job openings. This is job seekers per job opening. And so there are not as many seeking a job as a truck driver as there are out there that are seeking shipping and receiving jobs. So that's a pool of candidates that is not finding work in manufacturing that we could bring in as shipping and receiving clerks and then move over into other positions. And this is general manufacturing based on an hourly rate. So again, here you see other manufacturing listed in green for machinists, machine techs, maintenance techs, fulfillment, production technician, and then shipping and receiving, again, on the low end of the pay wage between $14.50 to $21.50 an hour. Digital press operators in yellow making significantly more, almost $20 an hour. Offset press, of course, then are making more than $25 an hour. But you see small machine or hand bindery there at just more than $15 an hour. So this is where I want you to see that shipping receiving is at the bottom and could be elevated, where an individual would be happy to take a promotion, doing meaningful work, making slightly more, and you have candidates from that area. So where do we get those candidates? How do we recruit them? You know, one is to put position openings out there for shipping and receiving and bringing them in that area and move them over. Another is to use this job candidate funnel, which is Print is Everywhere. And on that printindustries.org website, you can go to Print is Everywhere, see that campaign. It is really a recruitment campaign to help explain what print is. So there are 6 segments explained with 6 different booklets of different segments of the market. And there is a page on there where you can order your Print is Everywhere kit that comes in a fabulous box with all of those brochures and start using it to explain what our industry is and what it does. There are a lot that are not knowledgeable about what we do and excited about what it is. And they'd rather be doing this work than food service work. So great opportunities. Let's talk a little bit about post-COVID, how the world looks now, Rick.
Yeah, I think as we were drafting this paper, we were starting to come out of COVID, or see we were coming out of it, and did a lot of talking to members, what they're experiencing, what they're worried about. So there's a significant amount of attention devoted to that in the white paper as well. Obviously, the first statement up here, the world is forever changed, goes way beyond, you know, the medical part of the pandemic. It goes, how did people survive and what did they learn and how are they doing things differently? And so there's a lot in this area. We're going to see some of these labor metrics and staffing. We mentioned that earlier. The things have changed. I know a lot of our members, a lot of our clients changed the way they did their work, the processes, their staffing. There was a lot more collaboration, and that continues to this day, and will continue going forward. So, you know, most printers have an in-plant presence, so there wasn't a lot of work from home, but a lot of the office positions were converted to work at home during the COVID time. Some of that's continuing. We have seen, and nationally, that's a push that is definitely impacting other industries more than graphic arts, I think. But that's going to continue to bring pressure on how do you manage that when people are working more from home. So.
Well, and how do you manage your client? It doesn't appear that that's ever going to go back to where it was before. Even those that have rebounded from COVID are only requiring their staff, their office staff, to come in 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and they don't necessarily want to come back 5 days a week. And if a company is offering 2 days a week in the office and you're requiring 5, are you going to lose quality workers to other industries that are allowing it?
Yeah, I just saw a national survey on that yesterday. Most owners would prefer the 4 or 5 day a week back in the office, and I think the employees are down in the 2. So we have a disconnect there that's going to be there, and they're going to have to get worked out. And so it's going to reset. It's going to reset to something that's a new normal, and it will be different forever, I believe. So.
Yeah, it certainly is going to affect retention. And how can you be creative and balance it, yet still gain the productivity that you need, and all other things that are playing a role in this. Joe, you and I had a conversation earlier, about the economy as a whole, and about mergers and acquisitions, and about inflation, and how that all plays a part in the post-COVID world that's forever changed.
So true. And I think I have some insights from my daughter-in-law and my son, who both are in the software industry, and the dynamics that are occurring there, which are going to bleed over into our IT side of our industry as we become more digital, which is definitely what we're seeing, as you brought up in this post-COVID perspective. We're going to have to, as an industry, relook at how we look at our employees and our workforce. And it's going to be a challenge. We have to look at it very differently, and we have more competing industries. And as I said, with the software industry, they're struggling with the same things as we are, no different.
Yeah, we didn't devote much time to it on this slide, but you mentioned the customers, interacting with the customers. How do you connect with customers? How do you do that sales process? The whole sales process has changed. So that is impacting the cost of doing business. So the post-production, the post-COVID production process is what that should say. And there was a member that I talked to as we were developing this that hasn't dramatically changed their internal processes to the better. So we're going to see some gains because of that. Maybe compensating for some of the other issues, lack of workers and the higher costs, that type of thing. So I do think there's positives that definitely came out of COVID, and want to make sure that we look at that as we gather information in the survey for this coming year. Want to find out about as much of that as we can. We've got some of that identified, some examples in the white paper. So
Right. Right.
Teresa, maybe you want to take cross training. I know that's a favorite topic of yours. And
it is, and certainly it always should be done. You know, you got to have somebody that has to pick up the charge should someone get sick or not return to work. But more importantly, now than ever before, eliminating those silos and allowing people to wear more hats is crucial. It is what's going to help us to survive post-COVID and get things back to normal. But how do you adapt to that? And it's got to come to the top of the list and become a focal point to look at ways to do it and to do it in a creative fashion. All of this has to work in sync and become competitive at the same time. So we can't spend too much on labor, but we can't spend too little either, because we're going to lose them to higher paying jobs.
We had a quote in the white paper from a member. The days of a press operator being above running a shrink wrapper or packing boxes might be over. So it just goes to the cross training during COVID. Is everybody has learned to pitch in, and it hasn't been an issue. We haven't seen for our members anyway. So
right. This is kind of the meat of a lot of what we've talked about, really, those future labor influences. Can you talk about these, Rick?
Yeah, I touched on the efficiency gains. I think those are many and great in this area and are ongoing. And just think of Zoom. That doesn't necessarily translate into the printing plant, but it does indirectly. But pre-COVID, it was just an idea or a concept, and somebody had thought of it, but it exploded. And without it, I think we would have had major economic consequences. And the same thing has kinds of things like that have happened inside printing plants. These efficiency gains that we're hearing and seeing it from our clients are awesome, and they're excited, and moving the bar that they already moved has been great, but they see the potential to even do more now. It's just opened people's eyes to, like, we could do that in those few weeks and months. What more can we do? And so there's a lot left on the table, and I think people are excited about that. Artificial intelligence has made inroads in all industries, and in printing, the robotics and some of those things have also been you're seeing it at the McDonald's stores, but you're also seeing it in printing plants where we're trying to automate the processes more, streamline things so that maybe we are reducing or eliminating, unfortunately, some jobs in the process, but it's ongoing. And I in the white paper we shared an example of what one client had done during COVID, and just something to think about. We've talked about the skilled workforce shortage probably enough, but that is there, and how we manage that going forward, it's going to be huge. The post-COVID recovery, the economic side of this thing, as you just mentioned, is going to be. We are definitely seeing a lot of clients rebound dramatically compared to the COVID months, but that's going to be maybe a hit and miss recovery. We'll just have to see. There's a lot going on out there, and it's impacting the economy, and we'll just have to all navigate that together. So just keep your eyes on that. And two things I wanted to put a little more emphasis on here today is on the stimulus and the tax policy. As we all know, there was more stimulus given during the COVID time period to the business world, to the individuals, than we've ever had in the history of this country, possibly. And that has put an economic drain or strain on the country that maybe even hasn't been felt yet. And you're starting to see it. I think Joe mentioned the inflation and the M&A activity, and the things that are going on right now are driven partly because people see this stuff happening. They're trying to, get their ducks in a row to be able to survive this. But in the tax policy that's being talked about and how that's going to shake out, we have every client we have is talking about, how are we going to pay this stimulus back, and what's the tax policy going to look like, and what's that going to mean for our pricing, and the wage increases impacting pricing. And so these are just major things that all of us are going to navigate together.
So one quick note on that, Rick, I know you and I have talked about ERC a lot, employee retention credit, but I don't know that mainstream is talking about it as much as maybe you and I are. And I want everybody on this call to know that they need to look at that. That is more savings for their business to be able to adjust to how inflation is going to shake out in the economy later, and that there's money they're leaving on the table if they don't look at it.
Yeah, the PPP, we've got all the glamour and the attention, and PPP 1 and PPP 2, those are all done now. You can't get any more money, let's put it that way. There's still some reporting to get taken care of and all that, but the ERC, that's the employee retention credit, is still alive for all quarters of 2021. And so it's something, and 2020, and it's something that you can go back and amend if you qualified. It's not something like, oh, if we missed it, we missed it. It's something that if you qualified and you hadn't looked at it yet, but now you figure out you qualify, you can go back and amend and get these credits. And basically, I'm not going to do an ERC webinar here, but it's if you have an employee reduction because of COVID in 20 or 21, it's worth looking into. And the base comparison is to 19, the pre-COVID year, because the dollars tied up in the employee retention credit are as great or greater than the PPP loans that were given out by the federal government. And so we are seeing some of our clients get more money with ERC than they even got with PPP. So I'll just leave it at that. So that is still open, and if you're not aware of it, give us a shout, I guess, and we'll take you through it and see if you qualify.
Certainly, it's a good point. There are qualifications that you have to meet, but
Yep.
It's important to know whether you do or do not qualify.
Exactly.
Good point.
Culture is something, I'm sitting here in my office looking out at a bunch of people that aren't in my office and the ones that are here. It's a different culture than it was pre-COVID. And so every company, but every printing plant is going to manage this differently. We have angst in the workforce still. We have some people uncomfortable returning to the workforce. Some people changing their view of what's important in life. And the HR directors, God bless them, because they've got their hands full going forward on how to take this and help us maintain our employee population and grow it, because we're fighting a tough battle there, and have to pay attention to those nuances. And so we touch on that in the white paper. So.
Well, and inside and outside our industry, culture seems to have laxed a little, not so concerned about the dress code. More jeans are being accepted when they're coming into the office and so forth. But look at retail. And those are a lot of clients that our industry serves. Retail needs a lot of print to survive, and they're still opening later and closing earlier. If you look at a Macy's or a Dillard store, they're no longer 9 or 10 till 9 at night. They're at 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at times. And how does that affect the whole world and the economy?
Well, and every customer you have has their own COVID story, and how they're going about coming back to the marketplace maybe differently. It's a whole nother focus of how do your products and services fit going forward. That's not part of the labor study that we did, but that just brings to mind how difficult it is to continue to keep your eye on that ball.
Absolutely.
We've touched on remote workforce. The other one I see on here that we all probably are seeing in many ways out there is supply chain, and feeling that. It gets publicity in other industries, maybe more so than ours, but definitely, the paper issue and the pricing and some of those things that we've faced in this industry are supply chain issues, and there's a lot more than that. But as we navigate recovery of that, it's going to bounce all over the place too, and so that's impacting our efficiencies. That's impacting delivery of product. That's impacting a lot of things that impact labor performance and labor efficiencies. So we talk a little bit about that in the paper as well. So.
Absolutely. We don't have the materials there for them to work on, but we're still paying labor. Where do we get upside down there? And we just briefly skipped over, but it's still just as important, is data security. And data security is becoming so much more significant. It was always important, but now that so much has been pushed online and we have work from home tendencies, we really, really need policies in place to address how we handle that, and what happens if an organization is hacked, and so on and so forth. It is extremely important, and more hackers now than before, because so much more is being done remotely.
Right.
So important. Okay, so let's talk about planning and next steps. Certainly, it's easy to say, look for opportunities in the new normal, but that's not easier said than done, right? Joe, it looks like you were going to say something there. Were you going to? No. Okay. Being creative with your workforce options, and maybe a little more lenient to retain workers. Other industries are doing that. And as workers decide where they land long-term, some of that's going to be related to how creative you are with the options that you offer. Efficiency is key. It definitely plays a role in profitability. So now is the time to revisit or to start those lean initiatives again. Continuous improvement is not a once in a lifetime project. It's a daily event, and everybody has to always be looking for a more efficient way to do things. So put processes in place, reward your employees for bringing ideas of efficiency and continuous improvement. Be nimble and adapt quickly. And again, easier said than done. If you don't have the materials there, but you're paying that workforce, who makes the decision and at what time to decide to send workers home? And is it a cost savings, or is it an expense? Can you move them and adapt quickly from the press that can't run to the shrink wrapper and keep the wheels rolling in your plant. Being cost competitive and resilient. Cost competitive, Rick, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, a lot of what we've been talking about is try to make sure you're cost competitive as best you can, and best you have information to do that. And so, but every nickel counts in that environment, and the competitiveness of the industry is significant. Was pre-COVID, it's going to be post-COVID, and so we're all in that together. I just know this industry is very unusual in that we tend to share our successes, ideas, our good ideas with each other, and so I just want to encourage on all these points here for you guys to share with each other, and that will help the industry continue to remain competitive and viable and vibrant into the future. So.
Super important to share, because if we don't have a metrics to compare to, we're all in the dark. We don't know which direction to go if we don't know what's good and what's not. So obviously the last one here is targeting a sound workforce management effort. And it goes back to what Rick said about God bless those HR directors, because this is kind of their expertise. Targeting a sound workforce and managing that effort is crucial to survival today. One quick comment from Jim Cunningham on the ERC that you mentioned, Rick, and that is that Graphic Media Alliance is going to host an ERC webinar on Tuesday, July 20th. And if individuals are interested, let us know. We'll get you the details to that. I know, Rick, your group has done one for us as well. There is a recording to that. Certainly take the time and effort to reach out and get resources as it relates to that, so that you don't miss out on that opportunity.
Yep.
All right. Couple of slides and we'll finish early today. Of course, we said we have to have data to measure to be able to guide our industry. And the wage and benefit survey participation is a key to doing that. The data tells a story and it helps our entire industry. And it is completely protected from any exposure of any particular member or any particular region. There's been a lot of effort put into generalizing all of those reports so that it can't be skewed or expose any one or another as far as details go. So with a commitment to participate in the survey, you get the white paper for free. And of course, participating in the survey gets you access to all of those wage and benefit reports at no charge. There is not only a report for the entire nation, but we also break it down into 3 segments that focus on packaging, tag and label, in-plants, and union. But if we don't have enough participation, again, we can't report on that data because there is a minimum required to create an average. The more that participate, of course, the better the analysis, and it helps us tell that recruitment story. It helps us tell those workers that the majority of our industry offers benefits, good benefits, and a competitive wage and great companies to work for. So go to printindustries.org and submit your survey today. The final submission deadline is August 13th, so we can start analyzing that data. With that said, I'm going to open it up and encourage people to ask questions in Q&A and ask for comments from Rick and Joe on the details we've discussed.
I don't see any more questions, but I just think, again, I think this is a great tool. It goes back to the 70s, and unfortunately, so do I. Our clients have used it for that long, and it's kind of like the Bible, and so I just really love this this particular tool that the industry has. We serve as a CPA consulting firm. We serve a lot of different industries, but graphic arts being the largest one. But I don't see many tools like this out there. So I just wanted to plug it and tell you our clients and our members are using it, finding it beneficial. And so if anybody's on the call today that hasn't participated before, just sign up and use it.
Excellent. It's going to take us probably a few weeks. I'm thinking we have 6 weeks built in to do all of the number crunching and all of the report prepping. And so October is the ETA to release those reports. Definitely, you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out. There are COVID questions in there that have been updated to learn from what we've experienced in the last year. There's a question in here from Debbie that says, where do we email if we have completed the survey online in the past and have multiple locations in a different state? And Debbie, I'm going to have you email me directly. So you're going to get a PDF of these slides, and I'm going to actually go in and work on that portal so that you can have multiple locations if you've entered data before. The portal is important. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it's built with a SQL database backend that gives us some ability to do some comparison of things that we haven't done before. So the future of using that gives us the option to do some year-over-year analysis as well. And as we get through COVID, that information is going to become more and more valuable. Joe, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Teresa, just would like to reiterate the power that we observed over the years of participation. It varied year to year by quite a bit, in the sense that people just didn't want to go through the effort of going and putting up their data and reporting. It took a while to put it all together. So I'd like again to remind everyone, take the time to just go in there, give it a quick look-see, and make sure, yeah, maybe everything didn't change, but maybe it did. Maybe you had a press operator that left and you had to replace him at a different level. Or maybe you had some changes in policy that might have been fairly minor, but do have an effect. So consequently, the more we can report those kind of what we consider minor changes, it does affect the total policies as a whole of the industry. So take the time, if you did participate and your data's up, go up there and take a look at it, make sure it's right. We try to go through and analyze the data to make sure we don't have any outliers and there's bad data in there, but sometimes it can be missed. So go back in there and take a look at things. Typos do occur, things do occur that are a little glitchy. Just take the time. That'll give us good, solid data. So again, thanks for your participation, everyone online, and we hope to see you participate in the future. Again, Teresa and Rick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Our friend Jim Kiger has a comment that I love, and that is everyone should encourage their friendly competitors to participate. The more you guys talk about it, the more data we gather, the better the results and the analysis that we have. And I can't stress that enough. It is crucial to the success of the report to have participation. And if you mention it to your neighbor or to your friendly competitor and they participate, it might have been something they missed in an email from us or a social media post. Definitely. Any other open questions, Heather?
Don't think so. Anyone is welcome to chime in though in our last few minutes.
Excellent. So we have about 10 minutes. Certainly we can finish early. If you do have questions, welcome to type those into the Q&A now. If you have them after we finished, definitely email them to us so we can make sure we get them answered. While we wait to see if there are any others, I want to point out that the security of that portal is of the utmost importance. It is managed tightly so that all data is confidential and all data is absolutely secure. So you should not at all feel concerned about entering your information online.
It looks like we have one question from Jenny. She asked how to get access to the white paper.
Excellent question. So that's going to come from your affiliate chapter. Each of them will be provided with a list of participants and work directly with you to get that information to you. Good question. Okay, with no other questions out there, I think that completes our program today. Rick, thank you so much. The effort that you've put into this presentation and the white paper is priceless. Joe, your continued support over the years, you don't know the wage and benefits survey any better than a Joe Polanco. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Terrific. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll get this information out to you as quickly as possible. Thank you. Have a great day.